Hi, I'm Tori West. I've been in miniatures for about 40 years, and for at least the last 20 of those years, I've been using a product called Creative Paperclay modeling material. All of the things you see on the table behind me were crafted using this clay, and today I'm going to give you a closer look at these items and more as I walk you through the many ways this medium can be used and present 101 uses for Creative Paperclay. I hope you'll enjoy the presentation, and I hope you'll discover some new uses for this clay and have fun using it in your own creations.
Creative Paperclay can be used right out of the package. It doesn't need any kneading or conditioning, and when you take it out, it's about the consistency of a workable pie dough. It can hold its shape fairly well, so you can sculpt things directly from this clay without doing anything else to it. So straight from the package, this clay can be used for animal sculptures such as this 1/12 scale Gila monster and the rock he's sitting on. This piece is called Sunbather. Animals can also of course be created over an armature, and additional things can be added to them as well. So you can use the clay with various materials such as wood, paper, etc. This piece is called Strike. The western diamondback rattlesnake was sculpted over a wire. The Roadrunner has a body made from the clay, and his feet and feathers were made separately. All of the feathers were painted and cut, and that's one of the great things about this clay, the way you can seamlessly blend it with other materials. It's also really great for horns and bones, and that's one of my favorite uses for it. In fact, when it dries, the texture of it is similar to bone. This is a piece I made from patterns I developed so that I could create more realistic skulls by starting from the inside out and working outward in layers. This means that this piece is hollow all the way through, just like it would be in real life. It has openings for the eye sockets, nasal passages, the foramen, brain casing, etc. This is a dragon skull in progress, and you can see the way the clay looks when it dries and how it is similar to bone. This has a light wash over it, which helps me to further define where I need to do more carving and sculpting. This is also made from the inside out, like the steer skull. This is the half-scale version of the steer skull. It's made with the same patterns that have just been shrunken down, so it is also hollow inside, just like it should be, to have room for everything that needs to go into a skull. Here are some other skeletons I've created with this clay. The one on the left was commissioned for a doctor's office, and the one on the right was for a surgical theater. This is a 1/24 scale dancing skeleton in a Dia de los Muertos niche, and of course the sugar skulls are made with Creative Paperclay also. And this one is a very tiny Godzilla skeleton created for a collector. I don't normally make food items, but Suzanne McNeil does, and in this book she shows you how you can also use paperclay straight from the package to create breads, cakes, pastries, pies, fruits, vegetables, gardening items, and even a bunny. Fresh clay can also be used to create all types of rock and stone work, as I did for this piece I collaborated with Shirley Whitworth on for the Guild's Elements of Style clock case. The burrow, jug, and tree were also made from clay, and of course there had to be a tiny lizard on the rocks somewhere. The clay can be rolled out to various thicknesses and applied directly to structures. While still moist, the clay can be textured with any number of sculpting tools, embossing pads, crumpled foil, rubber stamps, etc. to create the look of various types of stonework and stone surfaces, tile, brick, stucco, wood and stone flooring, adobe, aged boards, siding, shingles, asphalt, terracotta roof tiles, And additives such as paint, sand, wood chips can also be mixed with the clay to create many more possibilities, such as cement, concrete, cinder blocks, and more. This is an example of how additives can be used to create certain textures. This is my concrete recipe. Paints, fine sand, and water were added to the clay and is then poured into a form and screed just like concrete. So you can see the division of the layers here, and the top seems smooth, though it looks like a little dog might have walked through mine while it was still wet. I can use that same recipe for other things. I found this in the hardware store. I'm not sure what it is called, some kind of nut, but I thought I could leave some of the water out of the concrete recipe, roll out the clay, and use this to create pavers. In much the same way as terracotta clay, paper clay directly from a package can also be thrown on a pottery wheel, rolled into coils and formed into bowls, rolled into large coils and formed into structures such as caves and beehives, cut, pressed, or rolled into slabs and used to build containers and structures. Fresh paper clay is also ideal for pressing into non-porous molds. The clay shrinks slightly as it dries, by approximately 6%, so it is usually easy to remove from the mold. However, a light dusting of talcum powder or cornstarch in the mold before use makes for a better mold release. Amazing Mold Putty, Flex Wax, and Friendly Plastic are some of the easiest products to use for creating your own molds. A few uses for molded clay are heads for human figures, using push molds commonly used for polymer clay, wall sculptures, decorative architectural elements, statuary, and elements of wooden signs or trade signs, tin ceilings, bowls from miscellaneous items, and structures made from containers such as plastic food containers and product cartons. That pie container made a great little Halloween candy corn house. Creative Paperclay can also be used as a mold material itself, either by pressing objects into it or forming the clay around the object to be molded. Because of the ability to form seamless joints, complex objects can be formed by combining any number of molded objects to one another. Fresh clay can be draped or formed over molds to create hollow objects or structural elements such as mushroom houses, jack-o'-lanterns, hollow trees, free-form fantasy structures, and stairs. These work-in-progress photos show an example of how a form was made with floral foam, cardboard, and newspaper, then covered with clay. The clay was cut apart and dry clay was added for each floor, then the staircase was created. Fresh clay will be added to put the pieces together once all of the elements are finished. Now I'd like to tell you a little bit more about the way molds, casting, and forming can be used with Creative Paperclay. For some decorative pieces on the Western storefront, I decided to try a different process from the way I usually work. The reason I did this was because not only do I like to experiment with different mediums, but I also needed 2 sets each of 4 corbels, and I wanted them to be exactly the same, or at least very close. I first carved the pieces from hard carving wax, which I knew would hold details well. Then I created a mold from the carving using latex. I also formed clay around the outside of the latex mold while it was still on the wax, so that once I removed the mold from the form, I would have a base that allowed me to press clay firmly into the latex. I repeated the process for the small set as well, and cast an extra set to store the molds on, which is what you've seen here. Paper clay can also be used as a mold itself, or used as a form to mold on top of. Some of you might recognize this guy. I've been working for a long time on an animated piece of an Edgar Bergen and Charlie McCarthy skit, so I will need to sculpt Edgar Bergen and cast him out of latex so that he can move freely. Occasionally I want to use polymer clay, but I have difficulty with keeping it from becoming too soft. So when I want to use it to sculpt heads, I will start with a rough paper clay skull, then paint a layer of liquid polymer clay over that, which allows the sculpting layer of polymer clay to stick to the paper clay form, and then sculpt the polymer. This is my initial sculpt of Edgar Bergen. He still needs some work, but when I have the sculpt finished, I will cast him in latex, then use paper clay over the metal mechanism to create an interior skull and fit that to the latex to hopefully create a realistic effect. I used a similar process for Charlie. I started with the smaller paper clay skull, added a layer of liquid polymer clay, then a layer of regular polymer clay, and sculpted the piece. But in this case, I then made another mold with Amazing Mold Putty and cast that with a paper clay slip. Most of the stuff on him isn't attached yet because I'm still working on him, so I can remove these items. Once I cast him in paper clay, I was able to trim the back of his head and fit all of the workings inside so he could be a working ventriloquist dummy. He doesn't really like being called a dummy, but that's the way it goes. Right now, he's still in the rudimentary stages. The Kevlar threads will be replaced with cable when connected to the motors, but as you can see, he has the mechanisms to allow his head to turn and his mouth to move. His whole body at this point is made from paper clay, except for a small wood frame that works as a brace for the brass fittings inside him. His arms and hands are clay over wire, so they are positionable, and his lower legs, socks, and shoes are made from clay also, so you can see how versatile this material is in creating the different textures. The NBC microphone is also made with paper clay. I couldn't find a screen in the size I wanted, so I carved the microphone out of clay and added all the little openings. And the base of Charlie's chair is also made from clay attached to brass. This is adjustable because once I make Edgar, I will need to make sure that he can make Charlie work properly. Behind those guys is another piece. Some of it is made with clay, but I mostly want to show you a somewhat quirky use for the clay there. These jack-o'-lanterns are made with Creative Paperclay. The scarecrow is not because he is hollow and has mechanisms in him. He was for a prototype I was working on when I was considering giving a class in animation. I can't reach his other cable back there, but anyway, he has both moving arms. His gloves and his hat are made from paper clay with some additional watercolor paper added. But what I most wanted to show you about this piece was that when I was doing the costuming, I wanted his jeans to look old and be worn in the right places, so I cut a piece of clay to fit in the jeans, carved out where I wanted dark and light areas, put that in the jeans, and then used sandpaper to create the wear marks where they needed to go. So that was just another fun way to use this material. This image is of the early stages of the cat from another animated piece called Love Potion number 999. The cat's tail flicks, his head turns, and his eyes blink. I created the mechanics from brass, added an LED for his eyes, then sculpted the clay over that. This clay is perfect for the purpose because it is so easy to add or remove areas as necessary to make sure the inner workings move freely, and it easily accepts the paint and glue needed to add fur and details. The witch is daydreaming as she stirs her potion and doesn't realize an ingredient is escaping. Meanwhile, her cat is watching for rats that he is too lazy to chase and wondering when he will get a treat. The witch is also sculpted from clay over her mechanical parts, and, well, here's a list of all the other things on this piece made from Creative Paperclay. The exterior frame, walls, curtain rod finials and brackets, the window frame, open spell book, mortar and pestle, wrought iron spider and web insert on the table, the fireplace, stirring stick, broom handle, cauldron, frog, witch shoes, kitty treat jar, treasure box, voodoo doll, books, copper goblet, purple vase, creature in case, vase with bleeding hearts, copper bowl, and of course, the rat. These animated fairies are also made with clay sculpted over the mechanisms. The cart and lizard on the left one are also paper clay, as are the rocks the one on the right is standing on. I have one last animated piece to share with you where paper clay was used extensively. This is one of our early pieces called Small Time Performers. It was created for one of our Tucson shows with the theme Under the Mini Top. It takes you back to the days when the circus was performed in tents, on vacant lots, or roadways. Performers and vendors would set up their stands along the midway to attract crowds to the circus and earn whatever extra money they could. I wanted the exterior to represent an arcade-type box with a big red button to start the show. All of the decoration is Creative Paperclay. Inside, the popcorn and the puppets are also made with clay. The performance is exceptionally ridiculous, but here goes.
Good day, ladies and gentlemen. We are the Great Clown Chorus, direct from France. And today we will be singing a song for you that I wrote. Ready?
Me. La la la.
Excuse me. We're the Great Clown Chorus of the Tucson Mini Show. We're really glad to see you, but now we have to go.
That's it? You didn't write that.
Did so.
Did not. And you're not from France either.
Am so. I speak French.
Prove it.
Chevrolet. Crepe. Suzettes. Filet mignon. Eau de toilette. Oui.
Do you have to go? I think we should.
Au revoir.
So far, we've still been considering the clay as it comes from the package or with a few additives. Now that we've survived the Great Clown Chorus, let's take a look at the way this clay can be used in other forms. Water can be added to the clay in various amounts to create a medium anywhere from super soft clay to a liquid form. In a liquid or paste state, it can be used for snow, branches, painted onto rice paper or watercolor paper to create small creatures such as lizards, painted onto forms to create masks and easily blend sculpted areas. Cast as slip, as you've already seen. In the paste or semi-liquid state, it can be used with a piping bag and decorative tip. It can be used as a cloth stiffener, and as a paste it can also be used as wood filler, texture medium, and for joining dry pieces of clay together. And that's the perfect segue to talk about the opposite end of the spectrum. Dry clay is equally as useful as wet clay. Creative paperclay in its dry form is easily cut with a jeweler's saw or scroll saw. And much like soft wood, such as basswood, the clay can also be machined or milled. These two casitas started out with sheets of dry clay. The pieces were cut out and put together with fresh clay. This is a 1/8-inch scale piece. The very tiny cat was made with paper clay. The bench was started with dry clay, as was the chimenea, and a very tiny mouse that was carved from dry clay. This is a half-scale piece, which also started out with dry sections, cut with jeweler's saw. The bench was also made with dry pieces. The door, window trim pieces, and shutters were also made by cutting various thicknesses of dry clay, and the steps were made in the same way. In addition to using dry Creative Paperclay panels to create structures, the dried sheets of clay can also be used for all types of carved signs, boardwalks, and doors. This quarter-scale door is a replica of the gate door on the Spadina Witch House in California. Dry clay can be used for forming trunks and chests, and unlike using wood filler on wood, repairs made with paperclay on paperclay are invisible. The clay can be carved and finished to look like just about anything. These 3 sets of gazing ball stands were commissioned by someone wanting pairs of granite, sandstone, and marble stands to place on walkways in her extensive mini garden. I've also developed methods for turning clay on the lathe. These pieces were all turned from the same blank and are in various stages of being polished. Here's a closer look at one of those vases and an additional turning. Dry clay can also be used for painting panels, graded, dyed and used as landscaping material, used as filler, and so much more. I probably could have made this video much longer, but all this talk about the way this clay can be used has made me want to create some more things. I always have Creative Paperclay on hand in all its various forms, so I can jump right into whatever my creative spirit surprises me with. I hope your creative spirit was inspired by the possibilities presented here as well.